So before we get into the background portion of this video, I'm going to address masking issues when you are taking an image shot in studio in a darker background and trying to incorporate it into a lighter background. So we're just going to go ahead and use the typical select subject, and I find that it does a very decent job these days. There are some feathering issues around some edges at times, but what you do is you just zoom in. And you're going to want to make sure that you clean up your mask if you need to. AI does a pretty good job, but sometimes it doesn't, like this, right? So you just have your lasso tool, hold your Alt or Option key to subtract from your mask. And then you can get rid of whatever area of the selection. And conversely, if you want to add more, all you have to do is hold your Shift key down and add to that selection. Okay, so then I just hit the mask like this. Once I do that, I click on my background layer, add a layer in between, and then I just fill that with gray. So then that gives you the ability to really zoom in and look at your mask and where you might need some help and some work. So this doesn't look too bad, but if I switch this to a really light background by showing you, I'll just fill my gray layer with this light color. So when you do that, then you can really see the edges and how dark the edges are. And that's pretty typical for shooting in studio. You know, like this portion of her dress is going to be too dark, all that stuff. So what do? I'll just show you what I typically do, especially when I'm taking the subject from a dark background shot in studio into a lighter environment. I'll put a layer above and I'll clip it by holding my Alt or Option key and hovering it between those two layers. And then what I do is I just grab a regular soft brush, and I'll go and determine based on my environment. So once I've already put my background images in, what I want this to be. Typically I'll sample the background or the environment like this, and I will reduce my flow down to around 50, and I'll just paint that color over my edges like this. And this just helps blend in your subject to that new environment. Okay, so this is typically what I will do. Because if you're putting this into a winter-like scene, you might want to have a little bit of lightness on the back of her head here because it's going to be a really, really bright environment. So you just add a little bit of that lightness this way. Even over here, and the same thing with the wings. Now, if you zoom into the wings, you can always choose one of these other colors and just come in like this. Like it doesn't have to be white. Like you can change the color like this if you want it. And down here too, see where that's a darker line? I would come in and just address that by painting over it like this. Okay, so that's how essentially you get rid of any darker lines. Just sample a color next to it and paint right over top. So once you've done that and you've lightened your edges, and now it blends in more with your environment, the next thing that we're going to do when you want to add the snow to your subject in the following part, you're going to need the proper brushes. So in my everyday set in my store, you can find the dirt brush. And this is what you're going to do when you want to have or put snow on your subject. So you're just going to go over the edge, just like this. And then down on her dress. And this will all blend into your background and your foreground, as you will see in the next step. But I'm just including this because I wanted you guys to know how to address any of your masking issues and also how to apply the snow and the other effects to your subject after you get your background put in. And then I have one more, and it's in the same set. It's down here under special effects, and it's called a Freckle Brush. This one is just a lot more snow-like. So we'll create another clipping mask. It's a little big. And these ones are quite sharp. So I do tend to sometimes create a Gaussian blur over top, just so that it's not too entirely sharp. But I like to do this one at the end. Just add a little bit more. Okay, I wanted to show you how to add all the snow and what have you in addition to the background. So now once you put this or you have your background, it's going to blend in pretty darn good. Okay, so I cut my subject out using the select subject as always. And then I always put a gray layer between that and my actual image, which is this one here. You can see how I shot it. So I've done some tweaks. Okay. So you really want to address these edges because you want them to blend nicely in your image once it's done. And you have a couple of options for that. You can simply just fade a mask out, right? You can use gradient, use a soft brush just to fade them, or, it just depends on what you want to do. But all we're going to do, we're not going to focus on her retouch. We're just going to focus on how to add these elements to your image because that's the most impactful part. So these are the images that I screen grabbed from Pinterest. And why? Because they are simply just AI images and there's no copyright on AI. So feel free to grab any AI image on Pinterest and try this yourself. So we're going to grab this one first. This one is the light on the left. So this is going to work because the light is sort of on her left. But before we do that, I'm just going to change the size of our canvas and make it just a little bit bigger, something like this, because we want her kind of in the rule of thirds up in this quadrant here. So something like that. And then you're going to have to go back to your gray layer and sample and just fill it. There you go. Now, when we grab our backgrounds, so this is a different one, but this one, we're actually going to put to her right. Actually, no, we're going to put this one dead in the middle. What you're going to want to do is add a mask to this and get rid of all of those harsh lines. And then you're going to grab another one and you're going to pull this one on top of that guy. Just trying to figure out where I want this one, probably right about there. You're going to add a mask to it as well. And you're going to do the same thing. Mask off all the hard lines. And lastly, we'll pull this guy on. Add a mask and do the same thing. So what do you do if you say, okay, well, I shot my subject in studio in a dark environment, so her edges are kind of dark too. What do you do about that, right? So let's just show you. So if you zoom in, you're going to see these darker edges. Well, you want her to match the environment for sure. And we're mostly concerned with these edges. First of all, they're too sharp. The background is blurry, so we need them to be less sharp. But what I'm going to do is add a mask, and I'm just going to reduce my flow to around 50. And I'm just going to kind of fade them. So you might have to make your brush small for certain areas, but we want to fade them. And then after we fade them out a little bit, then you can just blur them. Because we don't want these to be super sharp, and they should just kind of fade away. Like this one, way too dark. So make sure you fade your dress edges, especially if you have fluffy dress like this. I mean, you don't have to worry too much in an image like this because we're going to create a whole wintry scene and it's going to be covered in snow, stuff like that. It is just very helpful to do this. And once you do that, you can just grab your blur tool and actually go right over top of that mask if you want. I usually will do both, so I'll go over top of the mask so that only the masked portions will get the blur, but you can go right over your subject and really blur the edges as well. And because that background has a substantial amount of blur, I would suggest doing this. It'll just help with the realism. So we're going to add a layer above this and clip it. And we're going to zoom in and we're going to take a look at this. So you can see the mask wasn't perfect, but if you sample this color of the background and come in over top, you can clean up your mask fairly easily and quickly. So just get rid of that dark edge around our subject like that. And you can even do it like here on the hair. Because we've clipped it, it's only going to affect this portion of the image. And this just helps blend it all together. So see those dark edges? So this is how you get rid of dark edges. And then what about the wings? Well, you're going to want to add lightness to the edge of these wings. And it looks like they should be blurred too. So we'll do that as well. So yeah, this is how you can get rid of those darker edges if you shot your subject in studio and you feel like they're just not blending together well enough. Okay, so now your subject is essentially ready to be fit into the background. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to want to do a curves adjustment really quick. And I will show you the final image when I'm finished this. I just wanted to show you a couple tips and tricks, not the entire edit for this. But now we're looking at clipping this again, right? But we're going to increase our curves like so, and then we're going to invert it. And then that way, what we can do is just kind of lighten her up so that she doesn't look like she's got such dark arms here. Right? Let's lighten this up. This, especially the back portion and the hair, because it looks a little dark in here. And that's how we're just going to lighten her up and kind of make her blend better into the background. And then when you're in here, you can even brighten that up a bit more if you feel like it's not bright enough. But it also gets rid of some of that dark contrast, and that's just with a simple curves adjustment. You could come and add perhaps just a little bit more down here. And then what I always like to do is go right beneath our subject, and we're going to choose this kind of greenish color. We're going to go to gradient, and we're going to choose radial. And I'm going to make this probably about 65 as far as the size and drag it right behind our subject like that. And then you're going to reduce your opacity a little bit. You can use different blend modes if you want. I just use like a regular blend mode and then reduce this down to about 50. But do you see how it just softens everything in the background like that, which is really good? And then I'm going to do a curves adjustment on our background. I'm just going to pull the midtones down a little bit right about there, just adding a little bit matte by pulling my curve up like that. Okay. And then I'm going to grab this guy. Which one is it? This one. Again, I'm going to drag it on. But this one I want to go to the very top of our whole image. I'm just looking for foreground now. So hit enter and then Alt Option Mask. And now you've got that image for your foreground. And the reason why I put it on top is because I do want portions of it to go around her dress so that it doesn't look like she's floating. And then that way, what you can do is you can make your brush smaller, and then you can come around the perimeter of the dress, and then it'll look more realistic. And you might want to get relatively close so that it's not too dark around her dress. And then you can even put some of that over top so that it looks like she's got some snow. And because these images are just like little paintings, little AI paintings, let's get it straight. It's not meant to look photorealistic. So something like that, and that's typically basically good enough for what it is we're doing, because we're going to add snow over top and all that other fun stuff. You could change the color. It's kind of blue. We could change it to, let's do a selective color and just clip it. And in neutrals, just add a little bit of cyan so it's not quite so blue, because we do have a significant amount of cyan in this image. And then as far as our girl is concerned here, we do want to add another clipping mask to her. This one is going to be a brightness contrast, and I'm just going to pull the brightness down a little bit and invert it, because I don't want this dress to be this kind of crazy bright down here. I want it to blend with the image. And that, my friends, is essentially how you would do this. That's how I add in backgrounds and everything and blend them together so that they actually look pretty cool. And you can do your color toning and everything, and that's about it. So until the next video.